I often think that like we just have people like I don't have a CFA, right? And I'm not going to bag on CFAs. I'm only going to say like they did a really, really great job marketing the CFA. And back when I was coming up, like it was brand new. And, you know, it was kind of like, we really want to give you one, or we'll just give it to you. Your book is great. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't need that. I don't want that. I'm wondering like about accreditation.
Mhm.
And I have a specific view about where this goes, but I wanted to get your view because A, I respect it, but B, that you also have pursued or have already, you know, numerous advanced degrees. Do you think that accreditation, like I have a BA in economics, worthless. But in the old world, that degree suggested that I was capable. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think we've moved into a world where what I do is far more accurate about people's perceptions of me. Do they want to invest in a company that I've started, et cetera? What do you think's going on with accreditation, and where does it reach an end state?
It's interesting. So it's interesting that you bring up the CFA Institute, because Mark Franklin, the CEO of the CFA Institute, is actually my neighbor. We hang out and talk about this sometimes, right? But like, what is it that they're trying to do, and like, what is their purpose in this world of abundant things that appear like credentialing, right? Like, what is the point of a lot of this? How do they think about, you know, the job? Like, one way to think about like what a CFA is that it is somewhat like a luxury good. Like, it is a little bit like a Louis Vuitton bag in the sense that like, well, you want a one that's the real thing because it is costly to acquire and it signals a certain kind of thing, right? And it only comes and has a very specific provenance, right? And it signals that you have done the work to obtain this thing, right? Like however it might be. Right?
Yeah, and no question, I have massive respect for they hit virtually every Cialdini persuasion technique.
Yes.
And I think it's brilliant. But
so there's
keep going.
There's this really interesting challenge, which is like the challenge of luxury good manufacturers, right? Whatever they might be, whether they be handbags or CFA level twos, is how do you bring something to a mass market while it's still being scarce, right? Like, how do you grow a luxury brand while maintaining its value? Right. This is, you know, the person most uniquely qualified to answer this question in the world is certainly Bernard Arnault. But like, how do you solve this challenge of, again, like if you think about for the CFA Institute specifically, it's like you want to go take this, how do you go take the CFA program to a place like all these other countries in the world without diluting something for your charter holders and having them be mad and like all this stuff? It's like everybody, you know, these are the like, how do you maintain this thing? It's like, well, one way that you can sort of think of it is like, there's no upper bound on how much meaning can get created in things that have a sufficient degree of that can be subdivided in interesting ways so long as they have meaning to people, right? So an example is like there's no upper bound on how big the wine industry can get, right? It will never plateau. Right. The reason why it will never plateau is because you can always manufacture more meaning out of it because it is sufficiently complex and it is sufficiently developed to have these years of storylines in them. But most importantly, because there is sufficient mystery in them. Right. The power of mystery is massively, massively important in anything that has this hard to obtain component of it, which is like if it's perfectly transparent, it loses a lot of its value. Right. And I think anything that is a credential of any kind has to navigate this tension between, well, you want to be very clear about what the credentials are, but you also want to be very clear about what the mystery contained within it is. Right. And again, in the case of something like having like getting your CFA, actually an MBA is probably an even cleaner example, which is like, well, it's same thing. Not much difference in these two. It's like they have to simultaneously be very clear about what was done in order to obtain this certification, right? It's no different than like, what is the process by which I am showing you that this Grand Cru Bordeaux came from this row in this vineyard with this QR code that you can scan and like show that this is a real thing and not a counterfeit wine or something like that, right? While at the same time, right, doing that work in order to present the mystery of it, which in the case of credentialing for employment is like, this person might be the person who does $30 million worth of work for you, right? You don't know. Right? You don't know until you hire them, right? Whether they are actually that person, right? But this credential will get them to the point where you can make that bet. Similarly, you don't know if this bottle of wine is going to be good, right? You're making a bet, right? Every time you open a bottle of wine, you're making a bet, right?
Yep.
But there is all this work that the industry does in order to create a rarity around that bet that is desirable and good for everybody involved, right? Like similarly, like if you look at all these kinds of credentialing, right? It's like there is a lot of useful work that can be done for the benefit of everybody for creating that kind of greater transparency such that greater mystery may reveal itself.